Good morning. Welcome back to Unspoken Exit, a series about suicide, suffering, and staying. Today, we're starting with the foundational question, what is suicide? At its most basic definition, suicide is the act of intentionally ending one's own life. But that definition alone is so sterile. It misses the nuances, the context, the profound pain, or clarity that may lead someone to make this decision. So let's explore it a little bit more deeply. Right? Most people don't want to die. What they want is for the pain to stop. Whether the pain is emotional, psychological, spiritual, physical, it's often overwhelming. Suicide becomes a way to escape what feels inescapable. It's the solution some find when other options feel exhausted, inaccessible. This is important because if we don't understand suicide in this way, we might view it as irrational or impulsive. And while, some suicides are impulsive, many are not. They are considered, calculated, and in the person's mind, coherent. We often associate suicide with mental illness, and it frequently is. Depression, bipolar, PTSD, other psychiatric conditions, all of these can heighten the risk for suicide significantly. But not all suicide stems from illness. Some suicides are tied to terminal diagnosis, unbearable chronic pain, loss of autonomy, or the intense existential suffering. In some cultures and in some time periods, suicide has even been seen as an act of honor, protest, or sacrifice. So, from a clinical perspective, we assess suicidal ideations on a spectrum, right? Passive, active, chronic. Well, passive suicidal ideations is when someone thinks about not wanting to live, but doesn't have a plan or intent. I oftentimes will ask my clients to kind of categorize this. Is it, I don't want to be here, I want to disappear, I want to die, I want the pain to stop, I no longer want to live. Like or I'm just thinking about death, right? Oftentimes we lump all of these things into suicidal ideations, but it gets so much more complex than that. Just because somebody might not want to exist doesn't mean that they want to die. Sometimes when we think about death and our own mortality, that can cause concern. But we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. So passive ideations don't always look the same for everybody. Active ideations, this includes planning, intent, and often rehearsing visualization or visualizing the act. How am I going to do it? Playing that tape through. And then when we look at chronic suicidal ideations, this can become the background presence for some people, especially those who've lived with trauma or treatment-resistant depression for years. This is just in the background. It's the tape playing over and over, right? Suicidal thinking doesn't always mean someone is on the brink, but it always deserves to be met with compassion and care. So, philosophers have wrestled with this question of suicide for centuries. Albert Camus famously said, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." What he meant was that the decision to continue living despite the absurdity of life is at the root of human freedom. We'll come back to the existential and philosophical layers later in the series, but for now, just know that suicide is not just medical or emotional. It's not this phenomenon that is lumped into these two categories. It's also existential. It's moral, it's cultural, and it's personal. So let's pause and talk about language. We say die by suicide, not committed suicide. Why? Because committed is a word historically tied to crimes or sins. Suicide was illegal in many countries, and in some religious traditions, it's seen as a moral sin. Changing our language helps to reduce the stigma by saying died by suicide or ended their life. Affirms the person's humanity and acknowledges their pain. That being said, every suicide is a story. Not a headline, not a statistic, but a story. A story of someone who felt unheard. Someone who lost hope. Someone who tried, often many times, to survive, to heal, to be understood. Someone who reached a point where death seemed like the kindest option they could give themselves. Not the only option, but the kindest option. When we remember that suicide is a story, we're less likely to rush to judgment and more likely to lean into empathy. So, suicide isn't a mystery to be solved. It's an experience to be understood. In the series, we'll explore all of the ways people get to this point, culturally, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. We'll break down some of the myths, look at hard truths, and practice how to show up for others and for ourselves. If you ever thought about suicide, I hope you hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not alone. There's more to explore, and I'm grateful that you're here. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful, amazing rest of this beautiful day, and I'll see you soon.